Thank you very much, Jim, for being here with us today. And you're looking forward to listening to the great things you have to tell us about Hope College, which is a liberal arts college. And we're talking about STEM today. We have many students that are very interested in STEM, having to do with from neuroscience to engineering and chemistry. And we're looking forward to listening about Hope College.
Great, thanks so much. It is a pleasure to be here to talk to all of you. And I'm going to share screen real quick, and we're going to go right into the presentation. As I put in the chat box, I mentioned about your questions. So if you do have questions, feel free to, and I got to get this up to full screen here, just one moment. Yeah, feel free to put any questions in the chat box. And I will make sure that I get to these at the end. But if you think of them while I'm talking, please go ahead and put them out there. That way you don't forget that that you want to ask that question. So let's talk about studying STEM in the US, and then even more directly, what about at Hope College? What does that look like? I've tried to make it fairly generic. A lot of the information can be applied to almost any school, but certainly I'm going to use Hope College as an example. I am the director of global recruitment at Hope College, so I deal with all of the international students and the US students who live abroad as they go through the application and admissions process and scholarship process at Hope College. So what we'll do, and I'll give you my contact information at the end as well. But what we want to talk about is why study STEM? What does that mean? How do you kind of choose a STEM major? And then also a little bit about the admissions process. Again, some of this is going to be very generic, and that's, I think, helpful because it won't matter what school you look at, you're going to run into some of the same type of questions and information. So let's look at some of the reasons that students look at the US. Well, we do offer very good academic programs, and the degrees are recognized globally. I think, you know, even there, you've also got universities that offer some great degrees. So it's really the point of, you know, combining a lot of these reasons together to decide if US is right for you. So obviously you want to look for accredited programs. Now, keep in mind that in the US, the institutions, the colleges and universities are regionally accredited. They're not nationally accredited. And so most of the schools that you've heard about and most of the ones that you'll work with when you work with languages and innovations, you're going to work with schools that are accredited. But some individual programs also have accreditation. So it's good to check on that as well. Some just simply don't have it available. So it isn't a bad thing that they're not accredited if it simply isn't available. Academic excellence. Obviously, I think we do have some very strong programs. Hope is ranked nationally as one of the top 25 undergraduate institutions in the US for research. And again, that's at the undergraduate level. We don't offer graduate programs. So all of the research that's happening is undergraduate students, which is really incredible. We do offer, I think this is important as you look at college and universities, is what is that ratio of student to professor? How small are you going to get? How big is it going to be? Ours is 11 to 1, and our average class size is 14. So you're going to be able to be in classes that are very small, very intimate, ask lots of questions, lots of involvement with your faculty. That can vary too from school to school, because you might be looking at a large public institution that could have lecture halls of 300 to 400 to 500. So, you know, our biggest lecture hall only seats like 75 or 80. So that would be an entry level class. So there's just a difference. It's not a negative or a positive, because you have to determine what the negatives and positives are for you personally as you're going through this search. We feel that a liberal arts education does help you prepare for the job market and, frankly, for graduate school as well, because you're improving, you're working on your communication skills, your people relation skills, your ability to handle problems, be analytical about things. And we feel that all those qualities are going to help you no matter what job you go into. So we have a very high placement rate, and as do many other liberal arts colleges. And some of it is because we're really preparing our students very well. So you've got a list of majors that every college will offer, and most of the time there's also specializations. So there's specializations within each major, and you would hope, and I know we have this at Hope College, that you would have research opportunities as well, especially in the STEM fields, because that's really what it's about, is getting that practical experience, not just the classroom experience, but that practical experience as well. So the other thing that you want to kind of look at, not something you would worry about right away, but at some point in the process, is are internships available? Are you going to be able to, again, do that practical experience? 93% of our students, so 93 out of every 100 students at Hope, indicates that by the time they graduate, they will have done experiential learning, which means they've done research, internships, or study abroad, or very often a combination of more than one of those. So we want to make sure, again, that our students are prepared to move on to graduate school or the job force. Again, that goes into the career preparation. Because we're a smaller school, we can work with you closely all the way through the process. Career preparation doesn't start in your final year. It starts when you arrive on campus. We're going to have different programming every year to help prepare you and move you along so that by the time you are in your final year, you're feeling very comfortable with this process and you're ready to move on and do interviews for graduate school or the job force. So one thing some international students do consider is location, and I think that's perfectly acceptable. Any reason you have is acceptable, right? Because it's all about you and what you're comfortable with. So this is obviously a map of the US. Some of you have been to the US and some of you may not have been here, but you need to know that it is very large. If you haven't been here, then you may or may not realize kind of the size of the US. But we're located in Michigan. I don't know if you can see my cursor very well, but we're in the bottom left-hand corner of the mitten part of Michigan. So Holland is right down there in the bottom corner, sort of. It's up a little bit on the coast, but we're close to the shores of Lake Michigan. That's what this spot is right here, but to the left side of Michigan. That's one of the 5 Great Lakes. But to give you a concept of kind of how big things are, if I wanted to go, over a break time or coming up for the holidays, if I want to go down to Disney World in Florida for a vacation, if I wanted to drive there, it would take me 24 hours to drive to the middle of Florida. So 24 hours driving straight. So that's about how long that takes driving. To New York, I'm facing, if I want to go to New York City, number one, I wouldn't drive there because it's very expensive to park your car in New York City. But if you were going to do that, it would again take you, more than a day to get to New York City. It would take you probably closer to like 14, 15 hours. So maybe about 12 hours, but it's a full day's drive. So anyway, we're a large territory, but there are colleges and universities, 4-year, 2-year, all the different types in all of the states. So it's the matter of figuring out, what kind of environment you want. Along this northern tier of the US, where Michigan was considered in the northern Midwest, you're going to get winter. You're going to get all 4 seasons. We just had snow flurries here actually earlier today. I don't think they're here to stay, but we will get snow this weekend. I think it will melt and it will snow again in a few weeks, but it's just that time of year. Whereas down in the southern part of California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, etc., you're not going to have winter, or be very, very rare if you got snow down there. It does happen, but it's very rare. So again, there's nothing wrong with snow. It's just, what do you want to experience? I can promise you, I've never seen a frozen international student on my campus. They all do just fine, no matter where they're from. And a lot of them do come from very warm climates. So you've got a lot of options. Also within the US, you've got the small town, the big city, the suburbs. So you've got all those choices as well. So this is, again, zooming in on Michigan a little bit. We're over here in Holland. We're on the left side, right near Lake Michigan. It's a beautiful tourist town. We have a 4-block downtown area. We're a 3,000 person campus on a community of 34,000. So it's a small town, but again, tourist towns is very clean, very safe. And then we're about a half hour, 40 minutes from Grand Rapids, which is the 2nd largest city in Michigan. And we're a 3-hour train ride around the bottom of the lake to Chicago. And the train station is walking distance from campus. So it allows you to be in a nice, safe, small town, great academics, be close to Grand Rapids with its concerts and semi-pro sporting events and festivals, only a half hour away. And then obviously Chicago being one of the largest cities in the US, only a train ride away. So that's very convenient. And then we do have a lot of global corporate headquarters in West Michigan. So there are plenty of opportunities for internships as well. And so regardless of where the school is, it's important to look at the surroundings, especially if you're looking at STEM fields. So if you're going to be getting these research experiences, what's next? Are there companies? Are there corporations? Are there global entities around the area where you're going to be able to potentially do an internship or get a job after you graduate? Because you do have the chance to do a year of work. And with STEM, you actually have a chance to do up to 3 years of work after you graduate through STEM OPT. But what's around you? Are you going to have to travel further away to get these internships? And again, that's totally up to you. But you do have a cost of living change, right? If you compare Holland to Chicago or Los Angeles or New York, the cost of living is much cheaper in Holland than it is in a big city. So you've got to take that into consideration as well. So study options, we won't spend a lot of time on this, but just to show you how it works in the US, you've got secondary school, then you've got the option of going to, if you're going to go to school, either community college or a 4-year school. If you go to community college, you could then, you can get your associate's degree, and then you could transfer on to complete the year 3 and year 4 at a college or university. Either way, when you're done with a college or university, you could choose then to go on for a master's and then potentially a doctorate. Some programs, you move right from the bachelor's to the doctorate, just kind of depends on what the subject is. But that's how it looks. And we at Hope College, again, we only offer bachelor's degrees here, but a large percentage of our students do move on to another university for their graduate study. So what's the considerations when you're looking at STEM majors? So you've got your own academic preparation. What kind of coursework have you had as a high school student in the sciences, for example? How are you prepared to move on to a field also in the sciences when you get to university? Why is that important? Well, number one, so you do have that academic preparation and you feel comfortable in the classroom when you get into the academic program, but also if you're well prepared, then you don't necessarily have to take some, let's say, remedial courses, or you don't have to take courses to make up that level of knowledge that you might be lacking. That happens sometimes with engineering, for example. If you don't have enough math and physics, then sometimes the college university will have you take an entry-level math or physics class to bring you up to speed, bring you up to the level of the other students before you can start the engineering program. The problem lies in that if you have to do those preparatory classes that are kind of catching you up, it may delay your overall graduation beyond 4 years, because many programs are on a pretty strict 4-year schedule. So it's a case-by-case basis. It depends on what you've done. So obviously being as prepared as possible at secondary school is very advisable. Now, academic interests, I think when you're choosing a major, what are you interested in? What do you want to do? And you don't have to know this for sure. It's very easy to change majors when you're in the US. You are not typically not locked into a major. Sometimes when you get into a bigger university and you're admitted maybe directly into an engineering program, then yeah, you might have to then apply. If you get there and don't want that, you might have to apply then to a different program. So it kind of depends on how strict the school is on that, but you can still do it. It's just there's some paperwork you'd have to do. Whereas with Hope College, for example, you come and say you're engineering. If after the first year you decide you don't want engineering, you just go to a different major. You want to make any of those major changes though pretty early, because again, if you make them too late, change your major too late, then it could extend your stay with us, and we want you to be able to be done in 4 years. So there's that academic interest. What do you want to do? And thinking almost ahead, we'll bump down to the 4th bullet point of professional interest. Thinking, okay, this is my academic interest, but what do I ultimately want to do as a profession? And that may dictate a little bit what the major should be. But you might be surprised as to how many different major options you have for any given profession. For example, everybody thinks you have to be a science major to go to med school, and you don't. We have English majors that go to med school, but they also have a strong science background. So there are stipulations you have to have, or there's a prerequisite you have to go on to, a certain career or a certain grad school, but there isn't always a specific major. Exception might be like, okay, nursing. You really have to have a bachelor's in nursing to go on to a master's in nursing. So that there's not much flexibility there. Then also, obviously, the 4th item there, which could really be the first, it's program availability. You may have all the interest in the world in biology or chemistry or something like that, but if the college doesn't offer it, you shouldn't be looking at that college, right? I mean, so you want to make sure that if you're looking at STEM programs, that the colleges you're looking at do have very strong STEM programs. and our friends at Languages and Innovations do a great job of helping to advise you on really all these aspects, but especially making sure that you're kind of lining up your interests with the right schools. And there are many options. There's over 4,000 options in the US. So STEM is not only the future, but it's the now, right? STEM will continue to be the future because technology is always changing. Majors are always being added, deleted, changed. This shows you a list of many of the majors, not all, but many majors that one might choose if they're going to go into to STEM. Which STEM, if you're not familiar with the terminology, most of you are, but that's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. That's what STEM, so you're looking at it right in the middle of your screen. Those just aren't words, that's what STEM stands for. But look at the many options just right there, and there are many of them that you might choose, and this isn't an all-inclusive list by any means. So I think it just kind of depends on, and the US immigration has a very exhaustive, a very long list of the majors that qualify for the STEM OPT, qualify for the 3 years of work after you graduate. But you'll want to make sure as you work with your international student advisor at your university, make sure that the major you have does qualify if that's what you're trying to do, if you're hoping to do the 3 years of STEM OPT, okay? So this is just a sampling of those programs that I just told you about, and I'll try to get them all up here really quick without going to the next screen, I hope. This is just a sampling of some of the more common ones, I suppose, that are SEVIS approved. SEVIS is our immigration process where you have a SEVIS ID when you're an international student anyway. It's part of US immigration, but they're the ones that really decide which majors are eligible for STEM OPT, or 3 years instead of 1 of work experience. So again, this is just a sampling of those. It's a much longer list. Total list. So let's look at what we offer here at Hope. And again, you're going to get quite a good selection. I'll try to do this without going on to the next screen. But this is just a sampling of, again, some of the ones that you can do. Though this would be all of our STEM related program. But we are very strong in engineering. You'll see many different specializations in engineering. We do get into the health sciences, we get into the biologies and chemistries. So there's a lot of options there for you to consider at Hope College. So some of the important things to consider as you're thinking about this process. First of all, some majors at the undergraduate level are general, and further specialization can happen at the graduate level. For example, you may come to a Hope or some other school and study biology. You're not going to come necessarily and study, you're not always going to study a very specific area of biology. The undergraduate level is trying to give you as much of a general background as it can, with some opportunity to specialize and do research, but they're preparing you to be able to go on and specialize at the graduate school level. Is the most common. There's some specialization certainly that happens, like biochemistry as opposed to just chemistry, and neuroscience, things like that you can do, certainly things you can do at Hope. But if you want to get into like really intense areas of specific areas of biology or chemistry, like phlebotomy or some other kind of research areas, that's going to happen at the graduate level. We do have very extensive amount of laboratories, and that helps us in our goal of remaining in the top 25 in the nation for undergraduate research. That's rated by US News and World Report, but the funding we get and the research funding we apply for is typically through the National Science Foundation. At any one point, we have about $2 million in research money that's being used in research. And we have students doing it all 4 years. The qualified students are doing it as soon as their first year. I would say it's more common in the second year, third year, fourth year, but certainly there are some very qualified students that get to do it right away. And I think it's important to know that our students are doing research with faculty, not for faculty. The difference is if you do it with faculty, it means that your name is typically also on the presentation or on the publication or at the conference. Whereas if you do it for a faculty member, you're doing the work for them. They're getting the credit. And there's a little bit of a difference there. You can still put in your resume that you participate in the research, but you can't say that you are a principal researcher for that project. because that would be only the faculty member in that case. And again, our students are presenting and publishing their research on an annual basis. So as we've talked through some of these things, but thinking for yourself, what factors are important to you? So I won't go through like everything on the screen, but basically, thinking about that right match, what size school, what location, public or private, which to be totally honest with you, there's no difference between public and private in the US. That's just a factor of where they're getting some of their operational funding from, but there's no difference. Privates do tend to be smaller, not always though. There are some large privates as well, but I would say the majority of privates are smaller than the publics. And then, what kind of a culture is there? How many international students do they have? Do they have a strong international office that provides programming? We talked a little bit about location and climate and that kind of thing, and the smaller, the large. Even if you're in a small town like where Hope College is, do you have access to the city? Which that's what our students enjoy. They want the best of both worlds. They want to be in a safe, comfortable environment, but they want to be able to go to Grand Rapids half an hour away and go to the mall, go to a concert, whatever, whenever they really want to, or they want to be able to jump on that train for a 3-hour ride, a really pleasant ride to Chicago and be right downtown Chicago for a weekend. What type of learning environment is right for you? That's going to be really what's key. And maybe you don't really know that. So some of that is just kind of weeding it out, what's important and what's not. But it is the last one is probably should be the first one. And that is, do they have the programs and opportunities that you're looking for? I mean, that's key. The best student, the most famous schools you can think of may not be strong in the major you're trying to get. So it's important to look at the strength of the program and the opportunities they're going to give you there. So I mentioned CPT, or curricular practical training. Actually, I mentioned CPT and OPT. CPT, just to let you know, is the internship part. So you'll work with your academic advisor while you're at your school to be able to do an internship. You do pay for credits because you have to do CPT has to be for credit. It has to be part of your academic program. So they usually do 1 credit or 2 credits that you have to pay for, but you're going to earn much more money than that doing the internship. So, and getting that valuable experience, but you do have to have a job offer, and then you work with your academic advisor and your international student advisor to get it approved as part of your program. So it's definitely a doable thing. Most international students, I would say a high percentage of them anyway, do CPT or curricular practical training or an internship while they're in the US. And there's no cost to get approved for that by way of paperwork. Okay. And you can do multiple experiences. They just have to equal less than 1 year. Okay. So that's enough. We can do a whole session on work permission, and we won't do that today, but I just want to talk to you about these 2 opportunities. So OPT is what I've mentioned a couple times. That's the experience after you graduate. And I'm bringing up CPT and OPT because they are a big part of STEM. I mean, STEM students do CPT and OPT on a regular basis. You're going to apply for OPT in about January, like before you graduate in May. You'll apply about 3 months ahead of time, I think is the earliest you can apply. And then it's typically done after you graduate. You can do it before, but that's pretty rare. And I don't really recommend it, but you can do it after you graduate. You get 1 full year and then you can apply, if you're in a STEM program, you can apply for a 2-year extension. So you can get a total of 3 years. But it is expensive. You're going to play, and I think the fee is actually going up, but right now it's over $400 to apply. And again, the job you take ultimately has to be in your field of study. The same thing for CPT. So these work experiences have to be related to your field of study. Okay. And again, 1 year to start, and then you can get an extension up to 2 years. So let's really briefly go over the things you'll be submitting, and some you may have already done this. Obviously, the application for admission, and I'll give you my recommendations on all these things. Make sure that you're completing everything in the application. Don't leave blanks. It leads us to wonder why you left it blank. Is there something you don't want to tell us? Is there something you should be telling us? So make sure that all parts are completed. We need an official secondary school transcript. If you're graduating like this December or January, you don't have to wait till you graduate to apply. Obviously, if you're applying early decision or early action, you've already done it and you've submitted your through your grades through last year and your midterms from this year. Even if you're doing rolling admission, just be careful if you're going to wait till after you graduate. Be careful that you don't miss any scholarship deadlines. And so I encourage you to go ahead and apply before you've finished. But if you insist on waiting, that's okay, but just make sure you get it out right away. In fact, I would go through the application process now, get it all out there, and just then the only thing we're waiting for is your transcript. Because you don't want to miss any scholarship deadlines, and I'll talk about ours in a minute, but some of them are in January and February. February 1 is a real common deadline too, so you want to be really careful. If you've done any college or university after secondary school, you do need to submit a university transcript, even if you don't want to get credit. You can't just say, well, I want to start over. If you've attended somewhere, you have to submit the transcript. Most of you, but not all, will need to show proof of English proficiency. So the three most common tests right now are the TOEFL, the IELTS, and Duolingo. They can all be taken at home. Duolingo is the least expensive of the three. It is not the most widely accepted, although it's growing very quickly in its popularity and its acceptance. For HOPE, we're looking at a 79 TOEFL, a 6.5 IELTS, or a 100 Duolingo. So one of those. For us, if you have attended a high school where it was totally taught in English, we would waive this requirement, but not all schools will do that. So you need to check with the individual school. To be safe, I encourage having you take one of the tests, but you can decide that based on what your schools are asking for. The personal statement is most often a requirement, but not always. It depends on the school. But like for us, it is. We want to make sure we're very concerned about the fit of the student with Hope College. We're not right for everybody, nor is everybody right for Hope College. So we want to make sure that it's a good fit. We want to make sure you've done your homework in researching what Hope is about. So the personal statement can be very influential in many cases. Recommendations letters nowadays, many times are optional, but the more selective the school is, the more likely that they'll have recommendation letters as a requirement, because the more selective, like the Ivy Leagues and schools like that, everything's required. Multiple letters of recommendation, multiple, the SAT, things like that might be required. It just kind of depends. Again, the more competitive it is, the more factors that they have in their decision process. Right now, many schools in the US are SAT, ACT optional. I do anticipate after this year that some of them will go back to being required. It just kind of depends. That's a school by school decision. We do not require it of international students anyway. We have not since I started at Hope. I made that change, and so we don't require it. If you do have a good test score, though, I'd love to see it. I do encourage students with good test scores to include it anyway, even if it's not required. So how are scholarships decisions made, admission and scholarship? The primary factor is academic qualifications. I mean, it's pretty simple. We want to see how well you've done. We want to kind of make a good estimate of how successful we think you will be at Hope College or whatever school you're applying to. That's what they're going to do, is they're looking at the qualifications that you've got, the marks you've received, the classes you took, the type of curriculum your school had, those kind of factors, because we want to see what are your chances of being successful academically at our school. Other factors can come into play. The personal statement, again, could be influential if I feel that you have not researched Hope at all, or you've made references in the personal statement that are totally contradictory to what Hope is about, then I would kind of question, is this the right place for you? So the personal statement could be influential. It's a much smaller factor, though, than academics. Activities and leadership certainly can be influential. The more competitive the school is, again, the more these things can be important. But ultimately, if you don't have the grades you need, the minimum that they require, you're probably not going to get in when it really gets down to it. At Hope, we're looking for the equivalent to a B average, preferably a little bit higher than a B average. Our average GPA of our students, a grade point average of our students coming out of high school, is a 3.8 out of 4. So it's a very solid student. You don't need that A- average to get in, but that is the average. I would say the lower end is typically the AB average, or a little bit below that is the kind of the minimum typically of the students coming in. We just want, our faculty, although they work very closely with the students, but they do have pretty high expectations. So we want you to be as qualified as possible to make sure that you're going to be as successful as possible. So it's important at some point with your parents to have that money conversation. It's not an easy one. And some of you may end up being very disappointed that you don't have the kind of financial support that you were hoping you would have. But unfortunately, the education in the US is not inexpensive. In fact, some would say it's downright expensive. But what we try to do is offer at least some, many of us try to offer at least some financial aid or scholarship to make it at least a little more affordable. It's still going to be expensive though. So our total estimated cost for 22-23, so starting with next fall, is about $52,000 US. That includes room and board, tuition and fees, books, and health insurance. It does not include personal expenses or travel, which you have to take that in consideration. Even though I mean, you're going to have those annual costs, you just don't pay them to us. We do offer up to $25,000 in scholarship to admitted international students. I would say the average is in that 20 to 25 range. We have very few that wouldn't get at least 20,000. So you're going to have anywhere from 27 to 32,000 would be the balance typically to come to Hope. The scholarship stays the same for almost all of our schools in the US. The scholarship is going to stay the same for the 4 years, but the cost will go up annually, usually 2 to 4%. So you do have to factor in that next year your out of pocket or what your parents pay will be a little bit more than it was the year before. We do have an initiative called Hope Forward. And I'll just talk about it briefly. And it's a competitive full tuition opportunity. Admitted students will be invited to apply to Hope Forward. I encourage students to apply as soon as possible because the Hope Forward deadline is February 1. I would rather that students do it before that though. So if there's any complications or anything more information that I need, that we make sure we get it in by February 1. If you wait to apply till February 1 and then there's problems with your file, you've probably lost out on that opportunity. So I encourage you to do it earlier. So Hope Forward is again, a competitive opportunity where 20 students will be selected from a pool of applicants. 20 students will be selected to attend Hope tuition free for 4 years. Their obligation will be a few different activities throughout the 4 years, a couple activities a year that they'll need to participate in. They're very small activities, like one-time activities, but they also make a pledge to contribute back to Hope College annually after they graduate. There's no specific amount of money. It's whatever the student is able to or feels called to give on an annual basis after graduating. We anticipate interviewing 150 to 200 students for those 20 spots. So again, you have to be admitted first, and then you'd be invited to compete for Hope Forward. If you get Hope Forward, that takes the place of the other scholarships. So basically summarize that money. If you get the $25,000 scholarship, you're going to have about a $27,000 balance per year. If you get Hope Forward, you're going to have about a $15,000 balance per year. So some of these conversations with your family have to be, what is our ability to pay? As parents, what are they able to help you with? Also, do you have, and that's on an annual basis. Because it's important to realize when you get to the US college or university, there's not going to be all of a sudden more money that appears from the university. They're going to give you what they give you to come as a first-year student, and they're typically going to be renewable for the 4 years, but you're not going to find typically new opportunities when you arrive. So you have to count on whatever they're offering you to start with. That's probably what your balance is going to be scholarship-wise for the full 4 years. Do you have access to any loans, scholarships, or anything else from your home country that will allow you, or that you can use in the US? Certainly look into those from your church, from an outside organization, from whoever might be able to provide that support. Keep in mind that you are allowed to work on campus up to 20 hours a week during the school year, and you're even allowed to work up to 40 hours a week during break times or vacation times on campus only. But you're only going to make really enough to help your spending money. You're not really going to make enough to pay, your tuition or anything. You're just not going to make enough money to do that. Even in the summer, where you will be able to save maybe a couple thousand or $2,000 to $3,000, you might be able to save that much, but you will have some living costs as well in the summer. So again, it will be a help, but it's not enough to kind of pay that balance. So most students just end up working just for their own spending money. That's a pretty common thing. Now, if you get an internship at some point, you do have a chance of making a little bit more money in an internship. Again, that's just for the summer, and it could help you a little bit toward the next year. But again, you're talking about, $2,000 or $3,000, not like $10,000 or $15,000. So what are the next steps? Part of the admissions process is showing that you have financial support. So all of us have a financial support form, and then it has to come in with a bank statement from your parents or sponsor showing you have that balance of money available. Some U.S. schools require you to show the full financial support of the total cost up front. Others will admit you first and ask you to show the balance after scholarship. So it's up to the college how they want to do that. We award the scholarship first, and then we ask you for the balance. You have to show at least the first year's worth. It's the expectation of us and the Immigration Service that support will continue for all of the 4 years. Sometime in the spring, you will have an enrollment deposit probably, or a housing deposit, or some kind of a deposit that you need to put down with the school that you're going to go to. That locks in your spot on that campus. So for us, it's $300. That's just, it covers both enrollment and housing deposit. Other schools might have 2 separate ones. So it's up to you to figure out, and they'll tell you what your enrollment deposit will be in the spring. And it's usually due by May 1. But I would do it as soon as you're ready. Some students are ready in February to make that deposit. And then, of course, there'll be housing paperwork that you need to go through. Hopefully the school that you're going to does have housing on campus, and you can usually choose from a variety of different options for where you would live. The most common is a traditional style dormitory with, a wing of all male or all female, and then a bathroom, a shared bathroom down the hall. Some do have suite style where you share a bathroom with only like 3 or 4 or 5 other people. It just depends on the campus. And then, of course, you've got your visa interview. So you want to be very prepared for that. Again, your friends at Languages and Innovations will help you as you approach that time. There's no magic answer. We tell students not to memorize answers, but to answer very naturally those questions, because if it sounds like you've memorized your answers, you're more likely to get denied. They want to know you and your answers, not what you've memorized. And I think in general, we've had really good visa success from your area, but it's always it just depends on the visa officer and the paperwork that you presented, how prepared you are. So, and then you arrive, we have a week-long orientation for international students. We actually have some of that time period that parents can be oriented too. So we do have parents every year that come up to parent orientation while international orientation is going on. So it's a nice perk. And if they can get up there, we pay all their costs while they're on campus. We just don't fly them up, but it's a nice visit. So just a recap on just talking about your resources. So you may have a school that has a college counselor that you can use the resource. You may have Education USA. That's the US governmental office, maybe attached to the embassy or in major cities. You may have websites, friends, organizations like Languages and Innovations that will provide you a lot of that guidance that is really important as you go through the process. And they are one of the top providers in your country. So I do encourage you to certainly depend on them, use them, but also follow their lead. I mean, they're gonna have you do some things too that you need to do, and you need to follow through and do those things because it's really ultimately up to you. So printed guides like the US News that I have a picture of there, those can be good. Keep in mind that we do not have national rankings in the US. There are only books that have rankings in them, but these are not national rankings. So use them as a guide, certainly, but they are not, again, national rankings. So take them with a grain of salt, as we say. They're a good source, but they're not the end all to where you should go to school. Unfortunately, we haven't had in-person fairs for a couple of years now, but virtual events and hopefully the in-person events will come back in 22. We're all very hopeful of that. And then, of course, meeting either virtually or in person with US reps if that's possible. So hopefully that will, again, come into play more prominently in the year to come. We'll get back to normal. So that's a little bit, that's my contact information, crawley@hope.edu, and our website, www.hope.edu. I certainly encourage you to explore the website and learn more about our programs. And you can certainly reach out to me, and then you can certainly check with Languages and Innovations about getting my email later if you don't remember it or are unable to copy it down right now. Or put the questions through them and they'll get a hold of me either way. But again, let's go off. I'll stop sharing and I'll go to the questions, and then we can also answer, what's going on here. let's see. Any other questions that you're seeing?
Actually, I have a couple. If you don't mind starting with me. Well, someone asked where would this recording be, and we are going to post it in our YouTube channel, and we can send you the link also to the individuals that already signed up for, but couldn't get here today because either they're with final exams or this is still school time for them. So we're gonna send it to them directly or post it in the YouTube channel. And a question is, Daros, for example, who's here with us today, he's an IB student and he's taking English higher level. What would be a grade for a higher level English to be considered so he wouldn't have to take the TOEFL afterwards?
Yeah, I would say the first thing is many of us, if the student has been in an IB program where English has been the language of instruction, we're going to waive the English requirement just to start with. So he at least with hope, he's not going to have to take the English test anyway. Then it's up to the college itself whether they're willing to accept a certain grade in an English class as acceptable as a replacement for the TOEFL or IELTS or Duolingo. So again, that's every college makes their own decision on that. But like I say, for us, you've been in, I really, and our campus really respects the IB curriculum. We do give some advanced credit for HL classes with a score of 5 or higher. So you do have the chance of coming in with some college credit.
Okay. 5 or higher then. Okay.
5 or higher. Yeah, 5 or higher is a pretty common thing. You'll find some schools that will accept a 4. I've never seen, there may be some schools out there, but I've rarely seen anything lower than a 4. But 5 is the
fine. I was expecting some 6 or 7, but if you tell me 5, that's brilliant. And well, Daros says he just took his English test today.
Oh, okay. I hope you did well, Daros. But I think that the more competitive, again, that you look at, like if you look at the Ivy Leagues, they might be saying a 6 or 7. So it depends on the school as well. But the average, I'm glad you did well, Daros. The average, I would say that for normal average is probably a 5. That's pretty typical. Yep. Any other questions you can think of that based on the information I gave, any clarification? Sure, go ahead, Daros. You can either come on mic or you can type it in, either way.
Yeah, can you listen to me?
Yep.
Like the thing is, Paraguayan grades are graded through the 5.0 GPA. And like at least this year I have calculated my GPA already. And I have all straight A's, like both terms. And this term is almost finished. I have only 2 final tests and the extended essay to turn in, and I'm done with the term. Okay. And previous term I had all 5s, but the thing is, the US, they consider the GPA at a scale of 4.0, isn't it? Right. So how you can convert that?
Yeah, you would convert it by, if I remember right, and I'm trying to, so if you do, like if you had a 4.5 out of 5, for example, and then you did, so you can get an idea if you take on a 5-point scale, if you go 4, let's just go with 4.5. If you do 4.5 divided by 5 and then times 4, that will give you the 4-point GPA on a 5-point scale.
Oh, yeah,
but I think the other situation though is that the IB is a little bit different. It isn't, if you're talking about so I guess that's a 7-point scale, but we group like 6 and 7 or 5 through 7. No, I think 6 and 7, I think as an A, and then 5 is a B, and then 4 is a C, or something along those lines. People do it differently. So it depends on the school as to how they're doing it, but that's the one I've seen the most common. So the 7 points a little bit different, but if you did a straight 4-point Paraguayan schedule, a 5-point scale, that's how you'd come up with our calculation would be your GPA divided by 5 and then multiplied times 4.
And another question regarding GPA, about weighted classes. Like I have like the IB subjects. Yep. I think if I'm not mistaken, they are 7. So, and I think they have like an extra weight because they're IB, and 5 of them or 4 of them, if I'm not mistaken, are higher level. I have literature in Spanish, literature in English, business, and 3, sorry. Yeah, English in English, Spanish literature, and
Yep.
business management in higher level.
Yep. So two things. One, sometimes high schools will weight the GPA automatically. If they do, then a college is not going to re-weight it. They're going to take it usually as given. But if a high school does not weight the GPA when they send it to us, because sometimes on the transcript it'll say weighted and unweighted, we'll get both GPAs. So if there's weighted, most schools are going to take that weighted GPA. Again, most schools, if they're only given an unweighted GPA, we're going to then weight the higher level grades. And maybe even the SL grades, depends on the school, but definitely I would say most definitely HL grades are typically weighted. So again, that's up to the US school, but I would say the most common thing is that if it's not already weighted, then we would weight certain grades like IB or AP or any of the advanced level type of, especially if we're considering giving you university credit for it. I mean, they should be weighted higher, right? So that does usually bumps up that grade a half a grade. So if we were to say, if we said it was a B, then we might make it an AB or something like that. So sounds like your grades are all pretty high though. So I don't think you're going to worry too much about that, what that final GPA is. It sounds really good.
Yeah, no, this year I think it was like my best year academically, but
Good.
previous years probably will drop out like the GPA a little bit. But this is my first IB year because I'm currently finishing my junior year, so
Okay.
I have one more year to go.
Well, and you're finishing you're finishing on a high note. I mean, you've got this year on a high note, and then I suspect you have every right to believe that your next one will be just as good or better. So I think you're on the right track. We'd certainly love to see you consider Hope, and I'm sure really any school, anybody that I know, it sounds like they'd love to see you consider their school. So I think you got a lot going for you, Darryl.
Thanks for the praise.
You're welcome, and good luck. Anything else? Just to remind about the scholarships, I guess, like I mentioned, our Hope Forward, and that deadline is February. February 1 tends to be a pretty common deadline for scholarship. So I do encourage students who are in their final year or are going to be graduating or have already graduated to really get those applications in as soon as possible. If you do, like I mentioned earlier, if you do want to wait till your final transcript is available from your high school and that you've graduated, assuming they have those results very quickly after you graduate, then I think you could do that, but realize you're cutting it kind of close. For, if there is a February 1 deadline, you'll want to get that in immediately when it becomes available. And I think, as I mentioned, it's good to start the application process now, get everything else in so that if there's any questions that we have about any documentation, then we can ask those questions and you can still get it in before a deadline were to hit. Again, I would hate to see somebody miss out on a scholarship because there's an issue with the document that we just didn't get rectified in time. So think about that, I suppose, when you're going through the process. And yes, other questions. I see another raised hand.
Yes, that's me again. About these scholarships, because many students are already applying through Common Up, right? And they have the option there to actually report whether it's a 5.0 scale or 4.0, and then it's converted. But some of them graduate until, let's say, the 10th of December. So they will get, that's the latest. So they will get all they need to apply. And most of them already know, and they're applying with a midterm report. So they have everything ready. So you would say that they should apply now to make sure that they are on track for the scholarship on the Hope Forward. How do they apply for that? Do they apply directly to the website? Do they apply through you, CSS? What would that be?
Sure. So international admitted students are automatically considered for up to 25,000 at the point of admission. So that part just automatically happens. And then once the student's admitted, I will be in contact with them just to remind them about this, but they'll probably get emails from us as well to say, hey, the Hope Forward process is open and we encourage you to consider it. It's right from our admissions page. Down on the left side, it says Hope Forward, and you can click on that and it will open up an information page, but then there'll be a link also to go through the application process. And they're going to log in just as if they had logged in with the regular application with their same username and password, but then it will say start a new application. One of the options is Hope Forward. And so there's a secondary application. It's much smaller than the regular application, but there is a very specific essay question posed. And so what the student can do is start the process, get that essay question, then go leave the app, work on that response, then go back out to their app and then add it. And then qualified students, which I would say if you did a good job, if you followed the directions and you completed the application and you answered the question the way we asked, most students, I would say, will have a good chance of moving forward into the interview stage. It's the students that really either don't answer the question that was asked or write it really poorly, or leave a lot of blanks on the app. I'm not going to move those forward. If they didn't take it seriously, I'm not going to move them forward because this is a really big scholarship. And so from those that interview, and we anticipate interviewing 150 to 200 students, we don't really know what it'll be, but that's what we're anticipating. And there'll be 20 selected. Now, this year's class, there were 22 selected and 6 of them were international. And 1 was a US abroad. So 7 out of 22, so a third of the students were coming from overseas, which I think is very good. And so I think the $25,000 scholarship is very strong. It's almost 70% of tuition. So it's a very strong scholarship, but obviously Hope Forward is another level up. And so we certainly encourage students to consider both options. But again, the International Student Scholarship is kind of an automatic, you automatically be considered. If you don't have the financial support needed, even if you were to get, like, obviously it's $27,000 for the regular award, it's only $15,000 for Hope Forward. But if you don't even have $15,000, which I know is a lot of money, but if you don't have it, I encourage you to not go through this whole procedure because you have to be able to show that amount, that financial support to continue with the process. And we don't want to hold a spot in Hope Forward for you if you honestly don't have the financial support to continue on. We certainly want you to consider it, but that's just one of the aspects that has to be covered as part of the application process.
Clear,
Okay.
very clear. One last question, and it's for me. We talk with our candidates very often about fit and what it means. We say that students have a personality and universities have another personality. So it has to match, right? Mm-hmm. We talk about Hope College being a Christian college, but that doesn't mean that only Christians could apply. I mean, you receive and you're very open-minded to receiving any types of faith. And at the same time, people that are very keen on sports can apply to Hope because you offer different kind of extracurricular activities and sport that can be part on teams as well. So I just want you to mention very quickly, if you can, what kind of things that would do with the personality of your college and that could fit with our candidates as well.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And yes, we are a Christian college, but we do welcome, as you mentioned, students from all faiths. We do have chapel 3 times a week, but it's not required. Interestingly enough, that when we do have our chapel services, are 20 minutes, Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 10:30. Over 1,000 students, 900 to 1,000 students will go to chapel. So it's not required, but the chapel is packed because students just enjoy that experience. But we do have the most prominent kind of religion or Christian church represented, I should say, is Catholic right now with 17% of the student body. So there's a lot of other churches that are represented and some that don't have a faith. We certainly have students who are agnostic or atheist as well. And we just encourage dialogue. We encourage, that's just part of learning is dialogue. And we want students to ask the big questions. In terms of activities, we have over 80 clubs and organizations that students are involved in. We do have varsity sports teams. We are an NCAA Division III school, which means we cannot offer athletic scholarships, but we do have extremely strong teams. We have students that we have 3 teams that have already won conference championships this year from this fall sports. And so everything from the basketballs to what we call soccer, but you all call football, to American football, to volleyball, to swimming and diving and track and field and cross country and lacrosse, just all kinds of different sports. So again, these are at the varsity level, and anytime you're looking at a varsity level sport in the US, it is extremely competitive and hard to make the team. There's just no question. You pretty much have to be a regional or national level athlete in your home country to be considered for a US team. Because again, they're drawing athletes from all over the country, all over the US, and then of course, any from around the world that decide to apply as well. But it's very highly competitive. And so for those that aren't at that level, but enjoy some kind of sport, we do offer intramural sports and the ability to just play with a bunch of your friends and play against other kids from Hope College. And every school has, or almost all, 99% probably have some form of intramural sports that you can be involved in. And usually we have like sports all throughout the year, there's intramural sports happening. And then also all kinds of leadership opportunities within our clubs and organizations. So we want students to do what they enjoy. The other thing I should mention is we're a really strong fine arts school. So students that are interested in music, theater, dance, and art and creative writing, we do offer up a $3,000 scholarship by audition or portfolio for the fine arts. And you don't have to major in that fine art to get a scholarship. We have plenty of students who have $3,000 awards and they're majoring in something totally different than biology majors or engineering majors, but they're really excellent violinists, for example. So they're in the orchestra, they're getting $3,000 to be in the orchestra, but they're an engineering major. So I think that certainly that opportunity exists for fine arts as well. We had students this fall that were in the 2 theater productions that we've done so far. We had international students in both of them. So I think there's all kinds of some great opportunities to do things that you love. I mean, if you love the fine arts, keep doing it. It's a stress relief. It's something you enjoy. And we want you to keep doing those things that you love and enjoy to do.
Thank you very much. That's great to know because they might have other interests besides their minors or their majors. And that's really good to know that they can actually continue with that while, doing their career in a different major or minor. Thank you so much. Is there any other question, Daros, Alvaro?
Looks like maybe they're all set. Daros is all set. Good.
All
Well, great.
right.
Thank you both for hanging in there with us. And those, I know there's some that had to leave and those that will see this later, but I'm pleased to be a resource for Language Innovations. I'm pleased to work with them. And hopefully some of you will ultimately decide that Hope might be a great place for you to apply. But wherever you decide, just make, like discerning decisions about what's important to you and making those choices to get the best match for you as a student with that university or college that seems to fit your needs.
Thank you very much. We have already 4 applying already in the Common App. They're all set. So after this video and after that they watch this presentation, they might consider it as well, especially those in STEM careers. So thank you very much for the presentation and your time, Jim, and I'll see you soon.
Super. Thank you. Bye-bye now.